February 23, 1942, 1 mile off the coast of Santa Barbara, California. 1910 hours. The Pacific Ocean is calm, the swells rolling gently against the rusted iron hull of the Japanese submarine I-17. On the conning tower, Commander Kozo Nishino raises his binoculars, the leather strap creaking in the salt air. Through the lenses, the American coastline looks peaceful, defenseless. Nishino smiles. Just 2 months ago, the Imperial Navy smashed the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Now he is doing the unthinkable. He is bringing the war to the American mainland. "Gun crew, target the oil derricks," Nishino orders calmly. "Let us light a fire they can see in Washington." On the forward deck, the 14-centimeter deck gun barks. Boom! The shell whistles through the twilight and slams into the Elwood oil field. A plume of earth and metal erupts. Nishino watches the panic on the shore, cars swerving on the highway, lights flickering out as air raid sirens begin to wail. To him, this is proof of Japanese superiority. The Americans are soft, he thinks. They are a nation of shopkeepers and movie stars, terrified by a single submarine. He believes the war will be short. He believes that the warrior spirit, Yamato Damashi, will crush the decadent West. He looks at the oil tanks burning on the shore and sees a nation on its knees. But Commander Nishino is making a fatal miscalculation. He sees the oil derricks as targets. He does not see what they represent. He does not see the colossal, terrifying industrial machine that is slowly, groggily, waking up behind those hills. 3,000 miles away, in a smoke-filled boardroom in Washington, D.C., the reaction to the war is not fear. It is a cold, hard calculation of tonnage. Admiral Emory S. Land, head of the U.S. Maritime Commission, slams a fist onto a table covered in blueprints. The Navy needs ships, not just warships, but cargo ships. Thousands of them. They need to move millions of tons of tanks, fuel, and food across the 2 largest oceans on Earth. The president wants 18 million tons of shipping, Land tells his engineers. He wants a bridge of steel across the Atlantic and the Pacific. The engineers look at the blueprints. The design is for the EC-2 SC-1. It is not a pretty ship. It is a slow, tubby steamer with a raked stem and a simple steam engine. It is designed to be cheap. It is designed to be disposable. President Roosevelt calls it a dreadful-looking object. The press calls it the ugly duckling. But history will call it the Liberty ship. "We can't build them the old way," an engineer protests. "Riveting takes too long. Skilled labor is scarce. It takes 6 months to build a single freighter." "Then don't rivet," Land snaps. "Weld them. And don't build them. Assemble them." The order goes out. It is a declaration of industrial war. Across the United States, 18 new shipyards are carved out of mudflats and swamps. From Baltimore to California, the ground is leveled. The Japanese High Command, sitting in Tokyo, looks at the numbers. Their intelligence officers possess the same blueprints. They know the capacity of American shipyards. They calculate that, at best, the Americans can produce a few million tons a year, barely enough to replace what the U-boats are sinking in the Atlantic. They cannot sustain a war of attrition, General Tojo is assured. Their quality is poor. Their will is weak. They are wrong. They are counting shipyards. They should be counting the rage of a mobilized nation. In Richmond, California, a man named Henry Kaiser is staring at a stopwatch, and he is about to turn shipbuilding into a magic trick. November 8, 1942, Kaiser Shipyard No. 2, Richmond, California. 001 hours. The shipyard doesn't look like a construction site. It looks like a city on fire. Under the harsh glare of thousands of floodlights, the night has been banished. The air is thick with the smell of ozone from arc welders and the metallic tang of grinding steel. It is a cacophony of industry, a roar so loud it can be felt in the teeth of the workers. Henry J. Kaiser stands on a gantry overlooking way number 1. He is a heavy-set man with a bald head and the stubborn jaw of a bulldog. He isn't a shipwright. He's a construction magnate who built the Hoover Dam. To the Navy brass, he's an outsider who doesn't respect tradition. To Kaiser, a ship is just a building that floats, and he intends to build them like he builds roads. Fast, cheap, and endless. "Start the clock," Kaiser barks. A whistle blows. Below him, a crane lowers a massive 60-ton section of steel onto the slipway. It isn't just a keel plate. It is a prefabricated section of the double bottom, complete with piping and ductwork already installed. This is the secret. In traditional shipyards, men build a ship piece by piece, rivet by rivet, like a tailor stitching a suit. Kaiser builds ships like Ford builds cars. The bow is built in a parking lot. The deckhouse is built in a field 3 miles away. They are trucked in, lifted up, and welded together like a massive 3D jigsaw puzzle. The workers swarming over the steel aren't old salts with decades of experience. They are former waitresses, farmers, and grandmothers. They are Rosie the Riveters, wearing bandanas and leather aprons, welding torches in hands that held rolling pins 6 months ago. November 10th, 12 hours. Construction time, 60 hours. The ship, designated Hull 440, is already taking shape. The bulkheads are up. The engine, a massive 2,500 horsepower steam engine, is lowered into the hull before the deck is even put on. Japanese intelligence believes it takes 6 months to build a cargo ship. A fast yard might do it in 3. At Richmond, the Robert E. Peary is rising from the dead steel at a rate of inches per hour. The paint is being applied to the stern while the welders are still fusing the bow. The ship is hot to the touch, literally heating up from the friction of thousands of workers and the heat of the welding arcs. November 12th, 15:30 hours. Construction time, 4 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes. A crowd has gathered. Bands are playing. A bottle of champagne swings on a rope. In less time than it takes a Japanese task force to sail from Truk Lagoon to Guadalcanal, the SS Robert E. Peary is finished. Let her go! The chocks are knocked out. A massive gray hull slides down the greased ways, hitting the water with a tremendous splash. The crowd roars. It is a publicity stunt, yes, but it is a stunt that sends a shockwave through the world. While the Peary is an extreme example, the average production time is dropping like a stone. 230 days becomes 100, then 50, then 40. Kaiser is launching a new Liberty ship every single day. 3,000 miles west, in the humid, mosquito-choked jungle of Guadalcanal, the implications of this speed are becoming terrifyingly clear. January 1943, Rabaul, New Britain, Imperial Japanese Navy headquarters. Captain Toshikazu Ome stands before a map of the Solomon Islands. He is gaunt, his uniform hanging loosely on his frame. The Tokyo Express, the Japanese destroyer convoys used to resupply their starving troops, is failing. "We sank 4 transports last week," a junior officer reports. Trying to sound optimistic, the Americans must be running low on bottoms. Ome picks up a reconnaissance report. It details the American landing at Lunga Point. "They are not running low," Ome says quietly. "They are unloading ice cream machines. They are unloading crates of toilet paper. They are unloading prefabricated runway steel." He looks at his own supply manifest. His men are eating lizards and roots. They are counting bullets. Meanwhile, the Americans are building a concrete runway in the middle of the jungle and shipping in fresh steak from Australia. "We sink one," Ome murmurs, staring at the blue expanse of the Pacific map. "And 2 more take its place. It is like fighting the Hydra." The Japanese strategy was built on the idea of a decisive battle, one great clash of battleships that would break the American will. They never planned for a war of logistics. They calculate tonnage in terms of precious jewels. The Americans calculate it in terms of endless gravel. Ome walks to the window, looking out at the harbor. A single Japanese transport ship sits there, rusting, waiting for parts that will never come. The Japanese shipyards are still building ships by hand, riveting plates with skilled craftsmen who are slowly dying of overwork. He realizes with a sinking heart that the bravery of his pilots and the skill of his sailors might not matter. You cannot samurai sword a supply chain. You cannot intimidate a factory. The ocean is filling up with ugly, slow, gray ships, and they are bringing the end of the empire with them. October 1944. Ulithi Atoll, Caroline Islands. 06 hours. If you look at a map from 1941, Ulithi Atoll is a speck of coral dust in the middle of nowhere. But today, if you look down from the cockpit of a high-flying Japanese reconnaissance plane, it looks like New York Harbor transplanted to the equator. Lieutenant Commander Jiro Sato struggles to keep his Nakajima C-6N Mert steady at 30,000 feet. His orders are to photograph the American fleet gathering for the next invasion. He expects to see a task force, maybe 4 carriers, maybe a dozen battleships. He looks through his camera sights and his breath catches in his throat. "Impossible," he whispers into his oxygen mask. "The lagoon below is not water. It is steel. There are not dozens of ships. There are hundreds. 600 vessels are anchored in the turquoise water. It is the majestic murderer's row of aircraft carriers. Yes, but behind them lies something even more terrifying to the Japanese military mind. Row after row of Liberty ships. They are lashed together, creating floating piers. Some are floating warehouses, issuing spare parts for jeeps, radar sets, and cryptographic machines. Others are floating freezers, dispensing thousands of tons of fresh meat and vegetables to the fleet. There is even a concrete barge dedicated solely to making ice cream, producing 500 gallons a shift for sailors who haven't stepped on dry land in months. Sato snaps photo after photo, his hands shaking. He is documenting the death of the Imperial strategy. The Japanese plan relied on the Americans stretching their supply lines until they snapped. They believed that as the U.S. Navy moved west, away from California, it would grow weaker, hungrier, and lower on fuel. Instead, the Americans simply brought California with them. 08:30 hours. On board the Liberty ship SS Jeremiah O'Brien. Down on the water, the scale is less poetic and more industrial. Captain Arvid Carlson stands on the bridge wing of the Jeremiah O'Brien. He is a merchant mariner, a civilian in uniform, staring at the endless horizon of gray paint. "Manifest check," Carlson grunts, sipping coffee that, thanks to the supply chain, is fresh and hot. Unlike the rice water the Japanese admirals are drinking, we have 9,000 tons of 105mm howitzer shells, the first mate reads, 500 crates of blood plasma, 2,000 mailbags, and 40 cases of baseball equipment. Carlson nods. Baseball bats. They are shipping sporting goods to a war zone. This is the ultimate insult of the Liberty ship. It isn't just a weapon of war. It is a weapon of abundance. The O'Brien is one of thousands, a standardized, mass-produced box that carries the sheer economic weight of the United States. They are part of the service squadron, a logistical innovation the world has never seen. Instead of returning to Pearl Harbor to rearm, the battleships simply pull up alongside a Liberty ship in the middle of the ocean. They take on fuel, ammo, and food while underway. The war never stops. The pressure never lets up. November 1944, Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. The photos from Ulithi sit on a polished mahogany table. The room is silent. The air is thick with smoke and denial. An intelligence officer points to the grainy black and white prints. "We have identified the carriers, the Enterprise, the Essex." "Forget the carriers," an admiral snaps, pointing a trembling finger at the background of the photo. "Look at the transports. Look at the tankers." He begins to count. 10, 50, 100. He stops. "They are building them faster than we can manufacture torpedoes," the admiral says, his voice hollow. We sink a destroyer, and 2 weeks later, a new one arrives. We sink a transport, and a convoy of 50 appears. The Japanese have been hoarding their fleet, terrified of losing a single ship because they know it cannot be replaced. The Americans are treating ships like ammunition, expendable, plentiful, and endless. The admiral looks at the faces of his staff. They are the descendants of samurai. They are trained to die for the emperor. They are prepared to face fire and steel, but they are not prepared to face this. They are realizing that they are not fighting a military force. They are fighting a moving industrial continent, a conveyor belt of steel that stretches from the factories of Detroit directly to the beaches of the Pacific. We cannot win this battle, the admiral whispers, almost to himself. We are trying to empty the ocean with a spoon. Back at Olythi, the anchor chains rattle. The Jeremiah O'Brien weighs anchor. It joins a convoy of 40 other Liberty ships, all identical, all gray, all pointing their bows toward the Philippines. They are slow, they are ugly, but as they steam past the hiding Japanese submarines, they look like the most unstoppable force on Earth. April 1st, 1945. Shuri Castle, Okinawa. 5:30 hours. The end of the empire begins not with a bang, but with a shadow. Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, the senior staff officer of the Japanese 32nd Army, stands on the ramparts of Shuri Castle. The sun is rising over the Pacific, but the light does not touch the water. The ocean has vanished. Stretching from the horizon to the reef line is a solid wall of gray steel. It is the invasion fleet for Operation Iceberg. Count them, General Ushijima orders quietly. Yahara raises his glasses. He counts the battleships first, 10 of them, their massive 14-inch guns turning slowly toward the island. He counts the aircraft carriers. He counts the destroyers. But then his eyes drift past the warships to the transport area. It is a city at sea. Hundreds upon hundreds of Liberty ships and LSTs are bobbing in the swell. They are unloading a mountain of supplies that defies comprehension. In the first 24 hours alone, this armada will put 60,000 men and thousands of tanks on the beach. There are more ships than we have trees, Yahara whispers. The Japanese strategy for Okinawa is suicide. They know they cannot win on the water. Their plan is the Kikusui, the floating chrysanthemum. They will throw waves of kamikaze aircraft at the fleet, hoping to inflict so much pain that the Americans will retreat. April 6, 1945. Above the invasion fleet, Sub-Lieutenant Hitoshi, flying a obsolete A6M0 loaded with a 500-pound bomb, dives through the flak. The sky is filled with black puffs of smoke. Below him, the sea is a carpet of targets. He aims for a Liberty ship, the SS Hobbs Victory, laden with 7,000 tons of ammunition. Banzai! Hitoshi slams his plane into the superstructure. Kaboom! The explosion is nuclear in intensity. The Hobbs Victory vaporizes. A mushroom cloud of smoke rises 3,000 feet into the air. It is a terrifying display of destruction. But on the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Nimitz barely blinks. In 1942, the loss of a 7,000-ton transport would have been a strategic disaster. It would have delayed an operation for months. In 1945, it is a clerical error, before the smoke has even cleared from the grave of the Hobbs Victory. Another Liberty ship steams out of the reserve line to take its place. The crane operators don't stop. The landing craft don't stop. The conveyor belt of war shudders for a second, then grinds forward. The Japanese High Command watches this happen over and over again. They sink 30 ships. The next day, 40 more arrive. They damage a destroyer. It is towed to a floating dry dock, towed by a Liberty ship, and repaired in days. It is a psychological crushing. The Japanese realize they are trading their most precious resource, their young pilots, against the Americans' most disposable resource, mass-produced steel. By the time the Americans raise the flag over Okinawa, the statistics are finalized. The United States has produced 2,710 Liberty ships. A Japanese intelligence report makes its way to the bunker under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. It notes that the tonnage of shipping the U.S. Navy lost in the Okinawa campaign was greater than the entire tonnage of the French Navy at the start of the war. And yet, the American supply chain didn't even slow down. The report concludes with a sentence that serves as the epitaph for the empire. We can fight the soldiers, we can fight the tanks, but we cannot fight the factories. On September 2, 1945, the surrender documents were signed on the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. In the background of the newsreel footage, framing the end of the greatest conflict in human history, were the gray, rusty hulls of the Liberty ships. They were anchored in the bay, unloading the food that would keep the starving Japanese population alive through the winter. The conquerors had become the providers, but the peace was unkind to the ugly ducklings. Designed to last only 5 years, just long enough to win the war, the Liberty ships were discarded as quickly as they were built. Thousands were sold for scrap, their steel melted down to build the cars and skyscrapers of the post-war boom. Razor blades used in the 1950s were likely forged from the hull plates that carried tanks to Normandy and Iwo Jima. Huge mothball fleets sat in Suisun Bay and the James River for decades. Rows of silent, rusting ghosts bleeding red oxide into the water until they too were towed away to the breakers. But a few survived. Today, in San Francisco, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien still steams. She is one of only 2 operational Liberty ships left in the world. Visitors who walk her decks are often struck by how crude she is. The welds are rough, the quarters are cramped. She is not a machine of elegance, she is a machine of purpose. She stands as a monument to the impossible trick. The trick wasn't a secret weapon, or a brilliant general, or a super tank. The trick was a stopwatch in the hand of a builder named Kaiser, who realized that the way to win a war wasn't just to outfight the enemy, but to outbuild them. The Japanese commanders were right to be terrified. They counted 2,700 ships sailing past them, and in that endless gray line, they saw the future of the world. How do you feel about today's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.